The bridge of the Sentinel Prime hummed with activity as officers moved between stations. The massive warship cut through space like a blade, its hull gleaming under distant starlight. General Karasha stood at the center of it all, her tall frame commanding attention without effort. Her scales held a deep emerald color, marked with pale scars from countless battles. She had lived for 3 centuries and fought in more wars than most species could count. Lieutenant Jake Morrison watched her from his station near the communications array. He had been aboard the Sentinel Prime for 6 months now, serving as the human liaison between Earth forces and the Valorian Empire. The arrangement was new and fragile. Humans and Valorians had only joined forces a year ago when the Zandari swarm threatened both their territories. Trust came slowly between species, so different. Jake was 28 years old, average height for a human, with dark hair and steady brown eyes. Back on Earth, he had been a pilot and tactical officer. Here he mostly translated orders and tried to help 2 very different military cultures understand each other. It was harder than any combat he had faced. Kirasha turned toward him, her golden eyes sharp and focused. "Lieutenant Morrison, attend me in the strategy room." Jake stood and followed her through the corridors. Valorian crew members moved aside as their general passed. Some glanced at Jake with curiosity. Others looked at him like he was a child playing at war. He had grown used to both reactions. The strategy room was quiet compared to the bridge. Holographic displays showed star maps and fleet positions. Karasha dismissed the other officers with a gesture, leaving them alone. This had become more common lately, these private meetings that went longer than necessary. "The Zandari hive ship we tracked has changed course," Kirasha said, pulling up tactical data. "They are moving toward the mining colony on Petra 4. We will intercept them in 30 hours. Jake studied the display. "Their fleet is smaller than expected. Maybe a scouting force, perhaps." Kirasha's clawed finger traced a path through the hologram. "Or a trap. The Zandari are parasites, but they are not stupid. They worked through scenarios for the next hour." Jake noticed how Karasha had started asking for his input rather than just informing him of decisions. It was a small change, but meaningful. Valorians respected strength and competence above all else. Earning that respect from a warrior like Karasha meant something. "You think differently than my officers," Karasha said suddenly. She was looking at him instead of the display. "When faced with a problem, Valorians seek the strongest solution. You seek the cleverest one." Jake shrugged. "Humans learned early that we're not the strongest species out there. We had to be smart to survive. Your people have been in space for barely 2 centuries. Yet you have spread across 50 systems." Karasha's tail swished behind her, a sign of thought among her kind. "My people took twice as long to claim half that territory. There is strength in your cleverness, Jake Morrison." It was the first time she had used his first name. Jake felt something shift in the air between them. "We got lucky," he said. "We found the mass relay network early and we had good teachers." He met her eyes. "Like you." Karasha's scales rippled, a subtle change in color that Jake had learned meant pleasure or approval. "You do not fear me like the others." Why? Jake considered the question. Most species did fear Valorians. They were apex predators, built for combat, with strength that could crush bone and reflexes faster than human eyes could follow. Karasha herself had killed enemy warriors with her bare hands. He had seen the recordings. "I respect you," Jake said finally. "But fear? No, you've never given me reason to be afraid. You've been fair, patient, even when I made mistakes. You judge me by what I do, not what species I am. That's more than I can say for some of my own people." Something changed in Kirasha's expression. Her features softened in a way Jake had never seen before. She stepped closer, her height making him tilt his head back to maintain eye contact. "In 6 months you have impressed me more than warriors, who have served under me for decades," she said quietly. "You face challenges without complaint. You learn quickly. You treat my crew with respect, even those who mock you behind your back." Her hand rose, clawed fingers surprisingly gentle as they touched his shoulder. "You are worthy of respect, Jake Morrison. More than you know." Jake's heart beat faster. There was something in her voice, in the way she looked at him, that went beyond professional regard. "Among my people," Kirasha continued, "warriors choose their mates through ritual. It is called the proving. 3 trials that test mind, body, and spirit. Only those who pass can bond with a Valorian warrior." She paused, her golden eyes searching his face. "I wish to bond with you, Jake Morrison. But first, you must face the proving." Jake's mind raced. He knew about Valorian bonding rituals. He had studied their culture as part of his training. The proving was legendary, designed to push warriors to their absolute limits. Most candidates were Valorian themselves. With their superior strength and centuries of combat training, many failed. Some died. "I'm human," Jake said, his voice steady despite his racing thoughts. "The trials are designed for your people. I'm not as strong, not as fast." "No," Karosha agreed, "but you are clever, you are adaptable. These qualities have value beyond raw strength." Her hand moved from his shoulder to gently touch his face, her scaled palm warm against his skin. "I do not ask this lightly. The trials are dangerous. But if you succeed, you will stand beside me as an equal, not as a human among Valorians, but as my chosen mate, my partner in all things." Jake looked into her eyes and saw hope there, mixed with uncertainty. A warrior who had never lost a battle was nervous about his answer. It made her seem more real, more vulnerable than the legend everyone else saw. He thought about the risks. He thought about the impossibility of what she was asking. Then he thought about the past 6 months, the quiet moments between battles, the way she had listened to his ideas, the respect she had shown him when others dismissed him as just another soft human. "I accept," Jake said. "I'll face your trials." Karasha's expression transformed into something radiant. She pulled him into an embrace that was careful despite her strength. Jake felt her heartbeat slower and stronger than his own, drumming against his chest. "You honor me," she whispered. "Whatever happens in the trials, know that you have already shown courage that most warriors never find." She pulled back, and Jake saw her expression shift back to the commanding general. "The trials begin in 3 days. After we deal with the Zen, I will announce your intention to my senior officers tomorrow." A hint of amusement crossed her features. "Prepare yourself for their reactions. Some will be supportive, others will think I have gone mad." Jake managed a laugh despite his nervousness. "What do you think?" Karasha tilted her head, studying him with those ancient golden eyes. "I think I am about to discover just how remarkable humans truly are. And I think, Jake Morrison, that you are going to surprise everyone, including yourself." As they left the strategy room, Jake felt the weight of what he had agreed to. 3 trials designed to break even Valorian warriors. He was human, built differently, thinking differently. He had no idea if that would be enough, but he knew he had to try. The Hall of Echoes lived up to its name. Every footstep Jake took rang out against the metal walls, bouncing back at him from a dozen angles. The chamber was massive. Built into the heart of the Sentinel Prime, Valorian warriors used this place to test themselves, to prove their tactical minds could handle the stress of command. Jake stood at the entrance to the simulation pod, a cylindrical chamber ringed with holographic projectors. Through the observation window above, he could see Karasha watching him. She stood with her arms crossed, her expression neutral. Beside her, Commander Velshara made no effort to hide her disapproval. The older Valorian had argued loudly against allowing a human to attempt the proving. "The test will begin when you enter," a technician said. He was young for a Valorian, barely 70 years old, and he looked at Jake with something close to pity. "Once started, it cannot be paused. You may forfeit at any time by speaking the word, stop. There is no shame in knowing your limits." Jake nodded and stepped into the pod. The door sealed behind him with a hiss. For a moment, everything was dark and silent. Then light bloomed around him, and he was standing on the bridge of a warship under attack. The first scenario hit him like a physical blow. Enemy contacts surrounded his fleet, damage reports flooded in. He had seconds to make decisions that would save lives or doom them. Jake forced himself to breathe, to think. He analyzed the tactical display, identified the greatest threat, and gave orders to his phantom crew. The enemy broke through his left flank. 3 ships exploded. The simulation ended in failure. The pod reset. Jake was back on a different bridge, facing a different crisis. A plague ship approached a civilian station. He had to decide whether to destroy it or attempt rescue. He chose rescue. The plague spread. Thousands died. Failure reset. A supply convoy under attack. He split his forces. It was the wrong choice. Failure. Jake lost track of how many scenarios he faced. Each one was different. Each one pushed him to make impossible choices under crushing pressure. The Valorian testing system was designed to find breaking points, to see how long a warrior's mind could function under stress before collapsing. But something strange happened around the 10th scenario. Jake started to notice patterns. The test wanted to see how he handled failure, how he learned from mistakes. So he started treating each scenario not as a pass or fail test, but as a learning experience. When he failed to protect a colony, he understood why his defensive formation had been weak. When he lost ships to an ambush, he learned to read sensor data differently. The scenarios kept coming, but Jake's performance improved with each one. From the observation deck, Belshara leaned toward Karasha. He has completed 15 scenarios. Respectable for a human. He will break soon. Karasha said nothing. She watched Jake through the window, seeing how his posture had changed. The tension had left his shoulders. He moved through each scenario with growing confidence, making decisions faster, second-guessing himself less. 20 scenarios. Then 30. The technicians monitoring the test exchanged confused glances. Most Valorian warriors tapped out around 25 scenarios. Their minds grew exhausted from the constant pressure, the weight of thousands of virtual lives depending on their choices. But Jake kept going. His human brain, evolved differently than Valorian minds, approached the test from an angle the designers had never considered. Where Valorians sought perfect solutions and felt the weight of each failure, Jake accepted that failure was part of learning. He didn't carry the guilt of virtual deaths into the next scenario. He carried the lessons. Scenario 43 presented him with a classic no-win situation. A fleet of refugee ships fleeing a Zendari swarm. Not enough time to save them all. Most warriors chose to save the most ships possible and accepted the losses. Jake saw something else. He ordered the fastest refugee ships to accelerate away, while his warships created a debris field between them and the Zendari. Then he used the slower refugee ships as bait, keeping them just out of the swarm's reach while drawing the enemy into the debris. When the Zendari hit the field at high speed, their formations shattered. Jake's warships struck fast and pulled back. The swarm was damaged enough that all the refugee ships escaped. In the observation deck, several officers stood up from their seats. That scenario was considered unsolvable. It was designed to test how warriors handled unavoidable tragedy. Jake had just solved it. Impossible, Velshira muttered. The parameters don't allow for that outcome. Apparently they do, Karasha said quietly. She felt a mixture of pride and concern growing in her chest. He thinks outside the boundaries we set. The scenarios continued. Jake was deep into some kind of flow state now, his conscious mind barely involved in his decisions. He reacted on instinct and experience, trusting patterns he had built over dozens of trials. 50 scenarios. 60, 70. The test chamber grew warm from the constant operation of the holographic systems. The technicians realized they were watching something unprecedented. Word spread through the ship. Off-duty crew members crowded into the observation deck, watching the human who wouldn't break. Jake fought pirates in Scenario 81. He negotiated a hostage situation in 90. He coordinated a planetary evacuation in 100. Each scenario tested different aspects of tactical command, and Jake met each one with solutions that sometimes followed Valorian military doctrine and sometimes invented completely new approaches. By Scenario 120, Commander Velshara had gone silent. Her earlier scorn had transformed into something like, "Oh." She glanced at Kim. He should have broken an hour ago. His mind should be exhausted. Human endurance is different than ours, Kirasha said. Their bodies are built for persistence. Perhaps their minds are the same. Scenario 147 was a massive fleet engagement. The kind of battle that happened once a generation. Jake commanded 200 ships against 300 enemy vessels. He used feints and misdirection, split his forces in ways that looked chaotic but created local superiority at key points. He turned the enemy's numbers against them, forcing their ships to get in each other's way. He won. The simulation ended. The pod went dark. Jake stood in silence for a moment, swaying slightly. Then the door opened and he stepped out into the Hall of Echoes. The observation deck was packed with Valorian warriors. They stared down at him in complete silence. Jake looked up and found Karasha's eye. She was smiling, an expression that transformed her usually stern features. Kirasha activated the intercom. 147 scenarios completed. The previous record was 32, set by Commander Velshara herself. She paused, letting that information sink into the watching crowd. Lieutenant Jake Morrison has passed the trial of mind with honors beyond any warrior in our fleet's history. The observation deck erupted. Some warriors cheered. Others argued that the test must have malfunctioned. Velshara stood frozen, staring at the human who had more than quadrupled her record. Jake felt his legs shaking. Now that the test was over, exhaustion hit him like a hammer. A medical officer rushed forward to check his vital signs. His heart rate was elevated, his body temperature high. But he was functional. Karasha descended from the observation deck, pushing through the crowd. When she reached Jake, she placed both hands on his shoulders, a gesture of profound respect among her people. "You have shown wisdom beyond your years," she said formally. "The trial of mind is yours. Rest now. In 3 days, you face the trial of body." Jake managed a tired smile. Can't wait. Karasha leaned closer, her voice dropping so only he could hear. I designed these trials to be nearly impossible. I expected you to prove yourself capable. I did not expect this. There was wonder in her voice. What are you, Jake Morrison? Just a human trying his best, Jake said. The exhaustion was catching up to him fast. Did I surprise you? Yes, Karasha said simply. And now I am afraid. Afraid I'll fail the other trials. No, Karasha's golden eyes held emotions Jake was still learning to read. Afraid of what it means that you passed this one so completely. I tested you to prove you were worthy. But perhaps I should have asked if I was worthy of you. Before Jake could respond, his legs gave out. Karasha caught him easily, lifting him like he weighed nothing. She carried him toward the medical bay while the crowd parted around them. Jake's last thought before exhaustion pulled him under was that he had passed one trial. 2 more remained. And based on Karasha's reaction, he had set expectations impossibly high. He had no idea how he would top this performance, but he knew he had to try. 3 days after the trial of mind, Jake stood at the entrance to the Crucible. The massive training facility took up an entire deck of the Sentinel Prime, a 10-mile course of obstacles designed to push Valorian warriors past their physical limits. Jake had spent those 3 days resting and studying. The medical scans showed he had recovered fully from the mental exhaustion of the first trial. But recovery from what was coming would not be so simple. Karasha stood beside him, holding the ceremonial armor candidates wore during the trial of body. It was black metal, heavy and uncomfortable with weights built into every section. The armor was designed to simulate combat conditions where a warrior fought for hours while carrying equipment. This armor weighs 80 pounds, Karasha said. She helped Jake put it on, securing each piece with practiced efficiency. For a Valorian, this is manageable. For you, it will be a burden. Jake tested the armor's weight, feeling how it pulled at his shoulders and back. He had trained with weighted vests before, but nothing like this. What's the record time? 4 hours and 18 minutes, Karasha's voice held pride. I said it 20 years ago. Most warriors do not finish at all. Commander Velshara took 6 hours and collapsed at the end. She met Jake's eyes. There is no shame in attempting and failing. The trial is designed to find your limits, not to break you out of cruelty. I understand. Jake rolled his shoulders, trying to adjust to the armor's weight. But I'm going to finish. A small crowd had gathered to watch, larger than usual for a trial of body. Word of Jake's performance in the trial of mind had spread throughout the fleet. Some came to see if the human could maintain his success. Others came hoping to watch him fail and prove that his first victory was just luck. The starting horn sounded. Jake began to run. The first mile was through a corridor with shifting gravity panels. One moment Jake felt normal weight, the next he was crushed by 3 times Earth gravity, then floating in Z. The armor that already burdened him became crushing in high gravity and dangerously unstable in low gravity. Valorian candidates typically charged through this section with raw power, using their superior strength to overcome the gravity shifts. Jake quickly realized that approach would exhaust him in minutes. Instead, he timed his movements, waiting for gravity shifts and using the momentum they provided. When gravity increased, he stayed low and moved carefully. When it decreased, he bounded forward in long strides. That it was slower than the Valorian method, but it conserved energy. The second mile featured climbing walls that shifted and rotated while candidates scaled them. Jake watched one section rotate, studying the pattern. Valorians climbed with pure arm strength, hauling themselves up regardless of the wall's movement. Jake used his legs more, finding holds with his feet and pushing upward rather than pulling. It was a technique human rock climbers had used for centuries. From the observation stations along the course, officers watched in silence. Jake was moving steadily, not fast but not slow either. His pace was different from what they expected, efficient in ways that seemed strange to Valorian eyes. Mile 3 brought combat obstacles. Automated drones attacked with non-lethal weapons. Candidates had to fight through or evade them while maintaining forward progress. The drones were programmed for Valorian reflexes, striking hard and fast. Jake discovered that the drones expected certain responses. They anticipated Valorian strength and speed. When Jake moved differently, using human unpredictability and improvisation, the drones struggled to adapt. He ducked under strikes meant for taller opponents, used obstacles as shields, and turned the drone's own momentum against them. 1 hour passed, then 2. Jake's body screamed at him to stop. The armor felt like it was crushing his shoulders. His legs burned with effort. Sweat poured down his face inside the helmet. But he kept moving. This was where human evolution showed its true nature. Humans were not the strongest species or the fastest, but they were built for endurance, for persistence hunting, for running prey into the ground over long distances. What exhausted Valorian muscles in explosive bursts barely touched human cardiovascular capacity. Mile 5 featured environmental hazards, temperature extremes, chemical smoke, electrical barriers. Valorians pushed through with their natural resistances and healing factors. Jake had neither advantage. He studied each hazard, found the safest path, and moved with careful deliberation. By hour 3, betting among the watching crew had shifted. Initial odds heavily favored Jake collapsing before mile 6. Now bets focused on whether he could beat Karasha's record. Commander Velshara stood in the main observation room, arms crossed, watching the monitors. She glanced at him. His approach is wrong. He should be moving faster, using strength to overcome obstacles. His approach is different, Karasha corrected. He lacks our strength, so he uses efficiency. He lacks our speed, so he uses timing. She pointed at a monitor showing Jake navigating a maze of swinging barriers. What she is not trying to be, he is being perfectly human. Mile 7 was the breaking point for most candidates. A long uphill run through thick synthetic mud while carrying extra weight. Many warriors, already exhausted from the previous sections, gave up here. The mud sucked at their legs. The extra weight crushed their already tired bodies. Jake hit the mud section and almost fell. The armor that had been merely heavy before now felt impossible. Each step required pulling his leg free from the sucking mud, lifting the weight and planting forward. His breathing came in harsh gasps, but he had run marathons back on Earth. He understood pain, understood that the body could keep going long after the mind wanted to quit. He settled into a rhythm, however slow, and refused to stop. One step, another step, breathe, keep moving. The mantra repeated in his head as the mud section stretched on endlessly. Jake lost track of time, lost track of everything except the next step. When he finally emerged from the mud, he had no idea how long it had taken. His legs were shaking, his vision tunneling. Mile 8 awaited, a series of balance beams over water pits. Fall in, and the timer paused while you climbed out. Most exhausted warriors fell multiple times. Jake forced himself to focus. Balance was about center of gravity, about small adjustments rather than large ones. He moved across the beams like he was walking a tightrope, arms out, each step deliberate. He fell once, splashing into cold water that shocked his exhausted body awake. Then he climbed out and continued. Mile 9 was an obstacle course of walls, tunnels, and gaps that required climbing, crawling, and jumping. By now, most candidates were barely moving. Jake found himself running on pure determination. His body was done, his muscles had nothing left, but his mind refused to quit. He thought about Karasha waiting at the finish line. He thought about proving that humans deserve to be here, to be taken seriously. He thought about every person who had dismissed him as too weak, too soft, too human. And he kept moving. Mile 10 appeared ahead. The final stretch was a flat run to the finish, deliberately simple to see if candidates had anything left in their bodies. Jake could see the finish line through the armor's helmet display, 3/10 of a mile away. His watch showed 3 hours and 35 minutes. Jake started running. His legs felt like dead weight. The armor crushed down on him with every step. His lungs burned. His heart hammered against his ribs. But he ran. The finish line grew closer. Jake could see Karasha standing there, could see the crowd that had gathered. He pushed harder, finding speed he didn't know he had left. 3 hours and 42 minutes. Jake crossed the finish line and immediately collapsed. The world spun around him. He heard voices, felt hands removing the armor, but everything seemed distant and unreal. When his vision cleared, Karasha's face filled his view. She was kneeling beside him, her expression a mixture of pride and disbelief. "You beat my record," she said softly. By 36 minutes, Jake tried to respond but could only manage a weak nod. A medical team surrounded him, checking his vitals, offering water and supplements. His body temperature was dangerously high. His muscles were shredded from the effort. But he had finished. Slowly, sound returned to Jake's awareness. The observation deck above erupted in noise. Some warriors cheered, others stood in stunned silence. Commander Velshara's face showed pure shock. Karasha helped Jake sit up. Around them, Valorian warriors were gathering, looking at the human who had done the impossible twice. They struck their chests in salute, the sound echoing through the training bay. Velshara demanded, pushing through the crowd. She stared at Jake like he was some kind of puzzle she couldn't solve. "You should have collapsed at mile 5. The armor alone should have crushed you." Jake managed to speak, his voice hoarse. "Different doesn't mean weaker. just means different approach. Karasha stood, addressing the gathered crowd. Lieutenant Jake Morrison has completed the trial of body in record time. He has proven that human endurance rivals Valorian strength. To trials past, one remains. She looked down at Jake, and there was something new in her eyes. Not just pride or attraction, but a dawning understanding of what his success meant. Rest, she said. In 5 days, you face the trial of spirit, the final test. As medical personnel helped Jake to his feet, he caught sight of his reflection in a polished wall panel. The bonding ceremony took place in the observation dome, a vast chamber at the top of the Sentinel Prime where the stars blazed overhead without filter or screen. Jake stood beside Karasha in formal dress, feeling like he was living in a dream. The ceremony itself was simple by Valorian standards. 2 warriors declaring their bond before witnesses, pledging to stand together in battle and in peace. Karasha spoke first, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. I am Karasha, General of the 3rd Fleet, victor of 40 campaigns. I have lived 3 centuries and faced death 1,000 times. In all those years, I never met a warrior who surprised me, who challenged my understanding of strength and courage. She turned to Jake, her golden eyes bright. Until this human crossed my path. Jake Morrison has proven himself in mind, body, and spirit. He has earned the right to stand beside me. I claim him as my mate before all witnesses. Jake took a breath and spoke his own vows. I am Jake Morrison, human, officer of Earth's forces. I've lived less than 3 decades, fought in only a handful of battles. I'm not the strongest warrior or the fastest, but I'm stubborn, and I learn fast, and I'll never stop trying to be worthy of the woman standing beside me. He met Karasha's eyes. I accept this bond. Where she goes, I go. Her enemies are my enemies. Her victories are my victories. Today and always. The crowd erupted in approval, warriors striking their chests in rhythm. Karasha stepped forward and placed her forehead against Jake's, a gesture of intimacy among her people. They stood like that for a long moment while the stars blazed overhead. The celebration afterward went late into the night. Jake found himself surrounded by Valorian warriors who wanted to share drinks and stories. They treated him differently now, not as a curiosity or a pet project, but as one of their own. But Jake noticed something as he moved through the celebration. People were looking at him with a new kind of respect, something that went beyond passing the trials. When he spoke, officers listened. When he made observations about tactics or strategy, even senior warriors nodded thoughtfully. The trials had changed something fundamental. Jake felt it in himself too. There was a confidence in his bearing that hadn't been there before, a certainty that came from being tested at the absolute edge of his limits and not breaking. 2 weeks after the bonding, that change became impossible to ignore. The Sentinel Prime was leading a patrol group through contested space when sensors detected a massive Zendari fleet approaching a human colony on New Austin. The colony had 2 million people and minimal defenses. The Zendari force was 3 times the size of anything the Valorians had encountered before. Karasha immediately ordered the fleet to intercept. As the ships moved into position, she called a tactical meeting with her senior officers. Jake attended as usual, but this time he noticed something different. Officers who used to barely acknowledge him now watched him, waiting to hear what he might suggest. The tactical display showed a grim situation. The Zendari swarm was too large to engage directly. Standard Valorian doctrine called for a fighting retreat while calling for reinforcements. But reinforcements were days away. The colony would fall within hours. We cannot win a direct engagement, Commander Velshara said. She looked frustrated, angry at the limitations they faced. We must evacuate who we can and withdraw. The other officers agreed reluctantly. It was the logical choice, the smart choice. Karasha stared at the display, her expression dark with the knowledge that millions would die. Jake studied the tactical data, his mind racing through possibilities. Something from the trial of mind surfaced, a pattern he had learned about Zendari behavior. They were parasites, driven by instinct more than strategy. Their swarm tactics relied on overwhelming numbers and the Queen's ship's coordination. What if we don't fight them head-on? Jake said. The room went quiet. Karasha looked at him. Explain. Jake stepped to the display, manipulating the controls. The Zendari fight as a swarm. They respond to concentrated threats. If we scatter the fleet instead of bunching up, their programming will pause while they recalculate targets. In that moment of confusion, we hit the Queen ship with everything we have. Scatter the fleet. An officer named Drax shook his head. That violates every principle of fleet combat. We would be vulnerable, isolated, only for a few seconds. Jake countered. He pulled up data from previous Zendari encounters. Look at their response times. When faced with multiple scattered threats, they freeze for an average of 8 seconds while the Queen reassigns targets. 8 seconds is enough for a coordinated strike on the Queen ship itself. Commander Velshara leaned forward, studying Jake's proposal. If the Queen dies, the swarm loses coordination. They become individual threats rather than a unified force. But the risk is enormous. If the timing is wrong, we lose ships with no chance of mutual support. The timing has to be perfect, Jake agreed. But the alternative is abandoning 2 million people to die. I'd rather risk the fleet trying something crazy than retreat because it's safe. Karasha studied the tactical display for a long moment. Jake could see her weighing the options, calculating probabilities. Finally, she looked up at her officers. Prepare the fleet. We follow Morrison's plan. The next hour was a blur of activity. Ships moved into position. Each captain briefed on the unconventional strategy. Some were skeptical. Others were eager to try something different. All of them trusted Kirasha's judgment enough to follow orders. The Zendari fleet entered weapons range. 300 enemy ships against the Valorians, 100. On paper, it was a massacre waiting to happen. Execute scatter pattern now, Kirasha ordered. The Valorian fleet broke formation. Ships scattering in every direction. The Zendari swarm, expecting a concentrated enemy, faltered. Ships slowed, weapons systems hesitating as the Queen ship struggled to prioritize targets. 8 seconds of confusion. That was all they had. All ships target the Queen ship. Fire everything, Karasha commanded. 100 warships fired simultaneously. Missiles, energy, weapons, kinetic projectiles, all converging on a single target. The Queen ship's shields blazed with impacts, flickering, failing. A critical hit penetrated the hull and the ship began breaking apart. The Zendari swarm lost coordination instantly. Ships that had been moving with unified purpose suddenly became individual hunters, aggressive but disorganized. Without the Queen's guidance, they couldn't concentrate their forces effectively. Reform fleet and engage at will, Kirasha ordered. The battle became a chaotic brawl, but now the odds were manageable. Valorian ships, no longer facing coordinated swarm tactics, used their superior firepower and training to devastating effect. One by one, Zendari ships fell. Jake watched from the bridge, his heart racing. The plan had worked. It shouldn't have, but it did. 30 minutes later, the remaining Zendari ships fled. The colony was saved. Valorian casualties were minimal. The bridge crew erupted in celebration. Officers congratulated each other, relief and joy mixing together. But Jake noticed something. When Karasha called for reports, officers naturally turned to him as well, including him in the command structure in a way that went beyond his official rank. After the battle, Karasha found Jake in the observation dome, staring out at the stars. "You saved millions of lives today," she said, coming to stand beside him. "That strategy, that willingness to think beyond conventional tactics, that is what I saw in you from the beginning." "I just suggested an idea," Jake said. "You made the call to use it." No, Karasha shook her head. "You did more than suggest. You took command without holding rank. Officers twice your age listened to you because you spoke with the authority of someone who has been tested and proven. The trials didn't just test you, Jake. They forged you into something new." Jake thought about the past weeks. The 3 trials, the bonding, and now this battle. He realized Karasha was right. He had changed. The human who had first come aboard the Sentinel Prime 6 months ago wouldn't have spoken up in a command meeting, wouldn't have had the confidence to propose such a radical strategy. "I'm not the same person I was before the trials," Jake admitted. "No," Karasha agreed. "You are better, stronger, not in the way Valorians measure strength, but in uniquely human ways that I am still learning to understand." She took his hand, her scaled palm warm against his skin. "When I created the proving, I thought I was testing whether you were worthy of me. I was wrong. The trials revealed that we are worthy of each other. Your cleverness complements my strength. Your flexibility balances my rigid discipline. Together we are greater than we are apart." Before Jake could respond, alarms blared across the ship. Bridge crew rushed to stations. Karasha and Jake ran toward the command center. The tactical display showed another Zendari fleet, much larger than the one they had just defeated. This swarm was massive, over 500 ships, moving toward Valorian territory with obvious hostile intent. Commander Velshara looked up as they entered. "Fleet Admiral Corvin is requesting immediate tactical conference. Multiple colonies are in the path of this swarm. It's the largest Zendari force we've ever encountered. Kirasha moved to her command station, her expression hardening into the mask of a general preparing for war. But she glanced at Jake, and there was something new in her eyes. Not doubt or concern, but anticipation. 5 days later, Jake stood in the launch bay staring at the fighter craft that would either prove his worth or kill him. The Kalashin, the trial of spirit, was different from the previous 2 tests. This one could not be practiced or prepared for. It tested something deeper than mind or body. It tested the warrior's heart. The fighter was a single-seat Valorian craft, sleek and deadly. Jake had trained on similar ships but never in combat conditions. The controls were designed for Valorian physiology, the responses calibrated for reflexes faster than human standard. It would be like trying to pilot a machine built for someone else's body. Kirasha approached him slowly. In the 5 days since the trial of body, something had changed between them. She looked at him differently now, with a mixture of affection and concern that went beyond respect between warriors. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly, away from the ears of the maintenance crew preparing the fighter. "You have already proven yourself beyond all expectation. No one would fault you for stopping here." Jake turned to face her. "Would you have stopped if you were in my place?" "No," Kirasha admitted. "But I am We are bred for combat. You are human. Your people have only been warriors in space for 2 generations. Then maybe it's time to show what 2 generations of humans can do." Jake stepped closer to her, close enough that he had to look up to meet her eyes. "I see it in your face. You're not just asking if I can survive this trial. You're asking if I'll stand with you when things get dark, when tactics don't matter and only will remain." Kirasha's expression softened. "You understand me too well. That's because I pay attention." Jake smiled despite his nervousness. "I accept the trial, not to prove myself to your people, but to answer the question you're really asking." Before Kirasha could respond, Commander Velshara entered the launch bay with several senior officers. Word had spread throughout the fleet about the final trial. The bay was crowded with crew members who should have been at their stations, all wanting to witness this moment. Velshara approached Jake with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I opposed your bonding with our general," she said bluntly. "I believed humans were too weak, too soft for a warrior's life. You have proven me wrong twice. Today you face a test that cannot be won through cleverness or endurance." She placed her fist over her heart in salute. "Whatever happens, know that you have earned my respect." Jake returned the salute. "Thank you, Commander." The trial master, an ancient Valorian named Korsh who had overseen the Kalashin for 50 years, stepped forward. His scales were pale with age, but his eyes remained sharp. "The rules are simple," Korsh said. "You will fly into the asteroid field beyond this ship. We have seeded it with 200 combat drones set to hostile mode. Destroy 20 drones and return alive. You may forfeit at any time by activating your emergency beacon." He paused. "In 3 centuries of the Kalashin, 42 candidates have died. Twice that number have been permanently injured. Many more have forfeited. This is not a game." Jake nodded. "I understand." Korsh studied him for a long moment. "The trial tests Kased, the warrior's heart. It is not about skill or preparation. It is about who you become when death is close and your instincts take over. Some discover they are cowards. Others discover they are heroes. Most discover they are simply warriors doing their best." He placed a scaled hand on Jake's shoulder. "Discover who you are, human." Jake climbed into the fighter's cockpit. The seat was too large for his frame, the controls positioned for longer arms. He made adjustments as best he could. Strapping himself in and running through the pre-flight sequence, Kirasha appeared at the side of the cockpit. For a moment, she said nothing, just looked at him with an intensity that made his heart race. "Come back to me," she said finally. "That is not an order from your general. That is a request from your future mate." "I will," Jake promised. The cockpit sealed. The fighter's systems came online with a hum of power. Jake ran through the final checks, feeling the ship respond to his touch. Through the canopy, he could see the launch bay depressurizing, the massive doors beginning to open to space. Launch control gave him clearance. Jake fired the thrusters and shot out into the void. The asteroid field sprawled before him, a chaotic mess of rock and ice tumbling through space. Somewhere in that maze, 200 combat drones waited. Jake activated the fighter's sensors and immediately saw hostile contacts lighting up his display. The first drones came at him fast, firing weapons that would disable his ship if they connected. Jake twisted the fighter into a hard turn, feeling the G-forces crush him into the seat. The targeting system was designed for Valorian reaction times, lagging behind his human inputs. He had to anticipate where enemies would be, not where they were. 2 drones bracketed him from opposite sides. Jake dove toward a spinning asteroid, using its bulk as cover. One drone followed, and he spun the fighter in a tight loop that brought him behind it. His weapon's fire connected and the drone exploded. One down. 19 to go. More drones swarmed his position. Jake realized the test wasn't just about combat skill. It was about remaining calm while outnumbered, maintaining focus while death came from every angle. Fear would make him freeze. Panic would make him sloppy. The trial wanted to see what he was made of when every instinct screamed at him to run. Jake chose to push forward instead. He flew deeper into the asteroid field, where the rocks spun in unpredictable patterns. The drones followed, but their programming struggled with the chaotic environment. Jake used the asteroids as weapons, leading drones into collisions, using debris from destroyed rocks as improvised shields. 10 minutes into the trial, he had destroyed 5 drones. His fighter had taken several hits. Shield strength was at 60%. Breathable oxygen would last another hour. His hands were steady on the controls, but his heart hammered against his ribs. A large drone, bigger than the others, emerged from behind a house-sized asteroid. It moved differently, more aggressively. Jake recognized it as a leader unit, meant to coordinate the others. Taking it down would scatter the formation. He went after it. The chase led him through a canyon. Between 2 massive asteroids, the leader drone tried to shake him with sharp turns and sudden altitude changes. Jake stayed on it like a hunter after prey. That ancient human instinct that had once tracked animals across endless plains, now tracking metal and circuits through stone and ice. His shot took the leader drone in the engine core. The explosion was spectacular, sending shrapnel in every direction. Jake had to dive and roll to avoid the debris, nearly crashing into an asteroid wall. But the other drones hesitated, their coordination broken. Jake pressed his advantage. The next 15 minutes were pure instinct. Jake stopped thinking and started feeling. Every lesson Karasha had taught him about Valorian combat philosophy merged with his human adaptability. He flew like the fighter was an extension of his body, reacting before his conscious mind registered threats. He led drones into each other, used spinning asteroids to slingshot around corners, turned every disadvantage into opportunity. When his shields failed, he used the fighter's armor. When weapons overheated, he used asteroids as rams. 23 drones destroyed, more than the required 20. Jake's fighter was falling apart, systems failing one by one, but he was alive. He turned back toward the Sentinel Prime, pushing the damaged fighter to its limits. Behind him, more drones gave chase, but he outran them, diving through gaps in the asteroids that seemed impossible to navigate. The launch bay appeared ahead. Jake's targeting system was dead. Navigation was failing, but he could see the bay doors open. Welcoming him home, he brought the fighter in too fast, bouncing off the deck in a shower of sparks before the magnetic clamps caught him. The cockpit unsealed with a hiss and Jake practically fell out, his legs barely supporting him. The launch bay erupted in sound. Warriors shouted and cheered. Someone was chanting his name. Jake stood there, breathing hard, his flight suit soaked with sweat. Karasha pushed through the crowd. When she reached him, she pulled him into an embrace that lifted him off his feet. 37 drones, she said into his ear. You destroyed 37 drones. The previous record was 23. Jake laughed, more from relief than humor. I might have gotten carried away. Karasha set him down and stepped back, her expression formal despite the emotion in her eyes. Lieutenant Jake Morrison has completed the Kalashan with honors. 3 trials passed. The proving is complete. The launch bay fell silent. Every warrior present struck their chest in unison, the sound echoing like thunder. It was the highest honor Valorian culture could offer, reserved for heroes and legends. Commander Velshera approached, her expression transformed. I have served for 100 years. I have seen countless trials. Never have I witnessed performances like yours. She placed both hands on Jake's shoulders, a gesture of profound respect. You are worthy of our general, more than worthy. You honor our entire fleet. Korsh, the ancient trial master, made his way through the crowd. In my 50 years overseeing the Kalashan, only 3 candidates have exceeded the minimum requirement so greatly.